What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of T-Dub's Film Room, brought to you by thebarnauburn.com. And today we have another commit breakdown, this time a transfer cornerback that if I had to describe using one word, I'd say intriguing. Let's take a look at the film. All right, I like to look at, the profile here. So Rayshawn Pleasant, coming from Tulane, the 51 ranked cornerback transfer in the portal via On3 rankings, 408 nationally, in the whole portal. So whatever that's worth to you, it is kind of interesting. He's ranked one spot ahead Colton Hood, the former Auburn transfer to Colorado, now transferring to Tennessee. But some other guys, Nyland Green's a notable name. In some respect, we can scroll all the way up here. Raion Strader's like top 10 or 15-ish range in terms of corner rankings. We got a guy going to Alabama here at the top, Julian Humphrey. So number 51 player, so not, a superstar necessarily on paper by the On3 portal rankings here for whatever that means to you. Sophomore, so, he's got 2 years left to play here. 6 foot 180. He's listed 185. He had 27 solo tackles on the year. 1 interception, 3 passes defended. But let's pop on the film here and see what we see. All right, so there's 3 aspects to Rayshawn Pleasant's game that I want to highlight. So we're going to look at, basically one kind of full-ish game film here, the Kansas State game. They've got some good players. It was his first start on the year. This is the second game of the year last year. He had a pick 6 in the first game. That earned him the start this game. But his tackling ability is one aspect that we'll look at for sure. His coverage ability, obviously, being a cornerback. And then at the end, we'll look at his playmaking ability. You're going to want to see that because pretty exciting plays there. But so again, the first aspect here we'll look at is his tackling. So I think this is pretty important. He is a boundary corner for Tulane. All right, so you can see him line up at the top of the screen. Ball's on the right hash. He's in the boundary. He will flip side to side. That's how they kind of play this deal. So he will line up in the boundary if they're on one side of the field. Just to put it in perspective, that's, Jay Crawford. I think Raion Strader maybe, depending on how they want to move people around. But that's where he's playing. He's playing boundary corner. So typically you're going to put some bigger guys in the boundary. Better run defender here, the short side of the field. And here we can see his ability to defend the screen game in the perimeter. Okay, now look, nothing special, but coming up, making a tackle after the guy's already broken one tackle. There's nobody there to block him, but gain a 1 or 2. All right, so that's number 1. Now this play, we kind of get best of both worlds. All right, again, he's lined up in the boundary, top of the screen here. You see him flip the hips and run, and kind of like what I would say is a quarters. The quarterback pulls it down and runs. Here he comes, Rayshawn Pleasant. All right, quarterback puts a little move on him, but he's able to at least get the tackle. But there we kind of see here his open field tackling. Look, it's not perfect. Definitely something that, maybe can get cleaned up a little bit. But I will say, and we'll see him in a second, but he beat out a senior corner for the starting position here in this game. And the corner that he beat out missed a couple of tackles, a lot worse than this. And at least Pleasant here is able to get him on the ground. All right, so that's number 2. All right, some kind of bad work here by ESPN on the camera work. So the play had kind of already gotten started. This is as tight as I could get it here. But again, left hash, Rayshawn Pleasant's up at the top of the screen in the boundary. And we're going to see here, with the safety working over the top, it looks like he's got a little bit of freedom here to fit in the run pretty quickly. So maybe some kind of trap or just like 2 to this side with maybe some type of, quarters or even 3 or, who knows. Maybe this is like almost like a Tampa 2 or a 3 cloud or something like that. But he's got some freedom here to fit. He closes this thing down, and this is a good running back. This is DJ Giddens. So he was a 5th-round pick in the draft. For reference, Jarquez was a 4th-round pick, so I think the NFL valued them, fairly similarly. But able to close this thing down, pretty good stick there on DJ Giddens, and a pretty good tackle. And you can see his size. I mean, it's a good-looking dude. Like, the way he's built and the way he kind of moves around, he actually reminds me, just by watching him move around, he's built like Shedrick Jackson, kind of. Maybe Nehemiah Pritchett if you want to stick it specifically to the position. But he looks like a, 20-pound lighter Shedrick Jackson to me as far as his build. That's just kind of who he reminds me of. But that's a pretty good look there from Rayshawn Pleasant. All right, here's another one, that kind of the last one we'll look at. And you can kind of see with the time and kind of the situation here, he's playing a little bit of a cloud coverage. There's him again on the solo tackle. And the reason I was really analyzing the solo tackles, he had 6 solo tackles in this game. 6 solo tackles from a corner is, kind of insane, really. It's, not very common. You may see that from a safety or, a linebacker, but from a corner, pretty uncommon. So he was very active in this game, and I thought it was just, kind of good to point that out. But, overall, my perception of him as a physical player and as a tackler is actually pretty good. So, I think that's one aspect of his game that, one, being a boundary corner for Tulane, they play their boundary corner specifically a lot in the flat and let them kind of read the quarterback's eyes. That allows them a little bit more freedom in the run fits, how we were talking about earlier. So, I think he's a pretty physical corner and a pretty decent tackler. Okay. And that's like, for a cornerback to have a guy that at least is a decent tackler, that's a really good thing. So that's his tackling ability. Now let's look at his coverage skills. All right. So this is actually the first drive of the game, I believe, for Kansas State. You can see the down and distance 3rd and 4. Okay. I like this. It looks like kind of a single high look, maybe cover 3. You can see, everybody's got their eyes on the cornerback, but you can see how they're kind of, breaking this thing out. This is actually going to be some type of cover 2. All right, so he gets to trigger off this throw to the flat, and you can see what's going to happen here. 3rd and 4, it's going to be a play that sticks. The back doesn't get his head around. All right, but our guy's coming up here, I think, with some bad intentions. We talked about his tackling. This looks pretty good to me. All right, looks to me like he's ready to go, like he's going to be able to clean that play up and stop him on a 3rd down. So I like that a lot. Again, we talked about him playing in the flat. I think, we do some of that too, some of that cloud stuff, that mix kind of cloud coverage where the corner's playing underneath and helping out in the screen, the perimeter game, the run fits, that kind of stuff. So I think he'll be pretty good at that stuff specifically. All right, so we saw this play earlier, but I think it's good to look at it from the perspective of like his coverage ability. So again, quarters type look. Okay, he's got eyes on the receiver here, so maybe he's locked completely to the number 1 receiver. Who knows? But just a straight drop. You can see where his first look is. All right, the quarterback. It's clearly quarters, so this safety's not expanding. He's not help over the top, so it's 1-on-1. He doesn't like this. All right, so we got a pretty big guy in the boundary. It looks like he's staying on top of the receiver, so he's moved off immediately. And then, of course, he decides to pull it down and run, and we've seen this. But, there was pretty good rep to me of a bigger corner in the boundary, flipping his hips, staying on top of the receiver. All right, here's another one again. Same deal, top of the screen. All right, locked for sure. Stays on top, flips his hips. Now, again, terrible camera work, but this is Dante Cephas. This is a guy that can absolutely run, and a pretty good job here again by Pleasant, using the boundary as the 12th defender. All right, not giving him a ton of space and making it a really difficult throw and catch that they're not able to come down with. All right, now here's one that he's not going to love, but I actually think it's like a pretty good rep. So again, playing in the boundary. All right, but they got trips, or I'd say formation in the boundary here kind of deal. They got a tackle over, just kind of a goofy deal in general. But I'm reading this as cover 3. All right, it's 3/4. He's working in the middle. Rayshawn in the boundary, he's going to squeeze this down. It's kind of like a verticals type deal, and he squeezes this down pretty well, stays on top. The receiver tips it a little bit. Our guy, can't come up with it. Obviously, again, he probably hates that, but overall, I think it's a pretty good rep by him, at least just staying on top and then squeezing that down, because the weakness in cover 3 is going to be the seams, and he squeezes that down. And look, that's a tough one. The receiver got a little bit on it. Obviously, he would have loved to come down with that, but I don't think that's a terrible rep. All right, now I put this one in here because this is actually not Rayshawn Pleasant. This is the senior corner that Rayshawn Pleasant took his job, essentially. And we'll see, okay, it doesn't take a lot of time. This is the first play of the drive. We've got a play action shot. He's cooked. All right, quarterback obviously takes the shot. It's incomplete, but it's pass interference there from the guy reaching out. So I just think it was worth pointing out, like, a little bit of juxtaposition. He was able to excel past his competition on his team and earn that starting role, and it's because, I mean, look, boundary corner playing press man and then staying on top of that receiver and flipping your hips and running is not a given to be able to get that thing done. So here he gets cooked. He reaches out and grabs. They call pass interference. I mean, they could have called holding, but either way, I just thought that was a relevant thing to show in terms of, Rayshawn Pleasant versus like his peers. All right, last play here that we'll look at for his coverage, coverage breakdown. 3rd and 10. All right, you can see Kansas State's up 7, so they're trying to maintain possession, get a first down, but they want to protect the football at the same time. They're still in their own territory, so all that stuff taken in consideration. at the beginning here, they're trying to show, again, like a little cover 3, but you can see at the beginning, he's taking some steps in, so they're kind of expanding over the top, whether that's some kind of cloud or whatever they're doing. But they're trying to run a little, conservative play call here, halfback screen. He can release pretty quick. He's able to get underneath the lineman. He doesn't finish and make the tackle, but he at least gets enough of it to kind of shut it down. So, I'm not going to put this under the category of like an excellent rep, but I think, it wasn't a terrible rep. He knew where he was supposed to be. He recognized it, and at least, he helped make the play. And at this point was, a huge play in the game. All right, so we've looked at his tackling. We looked at, his coverage skills, best we can here. The third piece of his game, and most of you are probably somewhat familiar with this at this point, is his playmaking ability. Here he is, number 5, taking the kick return off here to start the second half versus Louisiana, all the way to the house. All right, this is one of 3 plays that I'll show you, him making here, which are pretty spectacular. Obviously, he's got some big play ability. All right, in Birmingham versus UAB, first quarter, he gets it right there at the goal line. He's going to take this one to the house as well. At the end of the day, we know kick returners are not quite as valuable as they were growing up, right? Because of the kickoff rules and, just kind of, there's just a lot more touchbacks than there used to be. But what I'm taking from this is, 1, he can probably help us in special teams, all right, and kick returning. 2 is just his long speed at the position as well. If he can flip his hips and be fluid, he can definitely run with these receivers. So I think that, all those things are good things. All right, and then we kind of referenced this earlier. This is the first game of the season last year. They're playing Southeast Louisiana, but again, Rayshawn Pleasant wasn't a starter at this time. Part of his reason for earning the starting position was actually this play right here. So you can see him in the boundary, kind of a double move sluggo. He plays it really well. All right, so not only does he get the pick, but he's got his eyes on the end zone, gets some help, cuts it back, and again, plenty of speed to burn here. So 3 plays that demonstrate him being a playmaker at the cornerback position. I don't think that's insignificant at all. All right, so this is kind of how I see this playing out in terms of his impact on the field this year. This is the field side. This is the boundary side. I think Kay and Lee, Blake Woodby are going to be your main guys to the field. I think Jalen Crawford, Raion Strader, and then, I said Strader, Rayshawn Pleasant here. I think those will be your guys in the boundary. So it's going to be really interesting to see the competition. But, I do see Rayshawn as a guy that can, at least provide some depth. I still think the first 4 are going to be Kay and Lee, Jalen Crawford, Blake Woodby, Raion Strader, but, maybe Rayshawn Pleasant here will kind of, slide into that 4th or maybe in that 3rd corner position. So that's the way I see it breaking down. Again, a guy that has, decent experience now. He's got 2 years of eligibility left. You got a guy like Kay and Lee that may can leave after this year. So I use the word intriguing to label Rayshawn Pleasant as a prospect, again, because I think he's got pretty good coverage skills. I think he's pretty physical. I like his size and his length and his tackling ability, and obviously his playmaking ability with special teams and stuff like that. But if I was to use one word to describe the pickup from the Auburn side, I may actually just say logical. Like, we lost J.C. Hart. I can't remember really if we lost anybody else, but when you've got a guy like this that you have the ability to pick up, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't. So makes a lot of sense. So Rayshawn Pleasant, a guy that, again, logical, intriguing. I'm excited to see, kind of what he develops into this season and maybe next season as well. So that's it for today. But as always, appreciate you guys watching. Stay locked into thebarnauburn.com, and I'll see you next time.